Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating new way to understand ADHD. What if it isn't about a lack of attention at all? What if it's actually about a powerful, almost impulsive drive for information?
So let's kick things off with this scenario, because wow, does this sound familiar to anyone else? You sit down to do one simple thing, and the next thing you know, you're deep down a rabbit hole. It's this almost physical pull toward anything new, anything interesting, just that next piece of information.
And that really makes you wonder, right? For a long time, an experience like that has been chalked up to a personal failure, a lack of discipline. But what if we've been asking the completely wrong questions about what's really going on inside the brain?
So let's start right there with that feeling, the tale of 27 tabs, because it is the perfect entry point for this whole new way of thinking about attention.
Now, before we can really explore a new idea, we have to understand the official story. What the textbooks say, and more importantly, where that story might be falling a little short.
So here it is, the clinical definition, straight from the DSM-5. And it's very clear in how it frames ADHD, as a dysfunction. Just look at the language here. Interferes, impairment. The entire focus is on what's not working correctly, on what's broken.
But here's the thing, and this slide just nails the paradox. The lived reality for so many people is way more complex. It's like two sides of the same coin. The very same traits that get labeled an impairment in one context, like a quiet classroom, can be an absolute strength in another, like when you need intense focus to solve a creative problem or handle a crisis.
So that tension, right, between the official definition and the lived experience, well, that leads us straight to a new theory that reframes this whole issue. And this right here, this is the big shift in perspective. Instead of seeing ADHD as a failure to control attention, what if we see it as attention being powerfully captured by certain kinds of information? Things that are new, things that are uncertain, or things that are just unresolved.
And that brings us to the core concept, hypercuriosity. This is not just, being interested in things. It's an intense, almost compulsive motivational drive. The promise of learning something new doesn't just feel interesting, it feels urgent. So compelling it can just steamroll everything else you were supposed to be doing.
What's so amazing here is how this one single idea connects so many different experiences. That painful feeling you get from routine tasks? Well, there's no new information to be gained. Losing track of time for hours? You're completely absorbed in an information-rich problem. Those racing thoughts at night? That's your brain compulsively generating new threads to follow. It provides this single unifying framework that suddenly makes it all make sense.
Okay, so you might be thinking, cool idea, but where's the evidence for all this? Well, it turns out it comes from neuroscience, behavioral studies, and even from looking back at human evolution.
Yeah, this isn't just a compelling idea, it's got real research behind it. Brain scans actually show a heightened sensitivity to novelty. Behavioral experiments show a clear preference for exploration. And all of this leads to a really fascinating evolutionary hypothesis about why this trait has stuck around in the human population. And this chart illustrates that evolutionary argument perfectly. I mean, think about it. Early human groups probably needed two kinds of attentional styles to survive. You needed your stewards, the people who were great at managing the resources you already had, but you also needed your scouts, the ones with those hypercurious, novelty-seeking minds who are essential for exploring, finding new opportunities, and spotting danger.
And get this isn't just speculation. There's genetic evidence that actually hints that this scout profile, this restless, curious way of engaging with the world, was more common in nomadic populations, which kind of suggests it was evolutionarily favored in environments that required constant movement and adaptation. Makes sense, right?
Which, of course, brings us to the big question. If this trait was once an evolutionary advantage, why does it cause so much difficulty and struggle for so many people today?
Okay, and this is a really important point to make. Reframing ADHD as hypercuriosity is not about calling it a superpower. That kind of language can be pretty misleading, and honestly, it often just dismisses the very real challenges people face every day. Because that same impulsive drive that fuels discovery can also lead to significant, life-impacting difficulties. These costs are very real, from struggling with repetitive work to chronic burnout from a mind that just can't switch off. Acknowledging the strengths doesn't mean we get to ignore the struggles.
So the core of the problem really seems to be a profound mismatch. The hypercurious mind evolved in a world where new information was rare, valuable, and often tied to survival. But it's now operating in a world of infinite information, where our attention is the product and algorithms are literally designed to capture that exploratory drive and never ever let go.
So this brings us to the final and maybe the most important implication of looking at ADHD through this lens of hypercuriosity.
This is such a powerful question. If the symptoms of ADHD aren't constant, if they flare up or get better depending on the environment, it really forces us to ask, is the problem located entirely inside the person? Or is it in the friction between that person and their environment?
And once you start thinking that way, it opens up all these new possibilities. I mean, what if schools created space for that kind of curiosity-driven learning, even when it veers off the lesson plan? What if they actually rewarded it instead of punishing it?
And what about our workplaces? Instead of forcing everyone into the same rigid mold of productivity, what if we actually designed roles that leverage the strengths of the scout mind for innovation, for navigating uncertainty, for seeing the connections no one else can?
And that is the final thought we want to leave you with. This isn't just about rebranding a diagnosis. It's a fundamental challenge to how we think about the human mind. It's a call to action that asks us to stop focusing only on fixing individuals and to start building a world with more varied, flexible, and supportive environments where all kinds of minds can truly thrive.